In my last video, I discussed the many possible fates of David Sean Murray, the young son of Edwin Murray. In that video, I discussed the three most popular options in terms of how David passed in the tragic accident that's referenced throughout Secret of the Mimic, and came to the exciting conclusion that there's too many conflicting points of information to decide on a definitive fate.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And so, I threw my hat into the ring on what I think happened. I personally think Afton delivers the pizzas on David's birthday that we see throughout MCM, and on his way out, he kidnaps David. If you haven't watched that video, what the hell are you doing here? For those who did, this video will be exploring the possibility and even the potential repercussions that would have on the timeline. There's been a lot of connections made between the crying child from FNAF 4 and David Murray. Both are children of inventors who carry around a stuffed animal that's important to them. They both wear striped shirts and even have the same bedroom, albeit a few changes. And if Hyperdroids' theory on the logbook is to be believed, the crying child's literal name is Dave Afton. And finally, not to mention, they both died on their birthday. Well, today, I want to continue looking at evidence pointing at the similarities between David Murray and the crying child. I've already stated the previous similarities I and many other theorists have noticed, but what other similarities can be drawn between the two? Before we start, I feel it's important to address some names and roles before we start getting into details. FNAF YouTuber Hyperdroid has discussed how you can get the name Dave from the word search in the FNAF Security logbook. Dave being the spirit speaking through altered text. Cassidy, the spirit speaking in faded text, discovered by Reddit user dpowerful1, whose true identity we won't get into here, is trying to help the spirit remember their name, and to do this, they bring up familiar toys, environments, and sounds. Why is it important Dave remembers who he is? Well, according to the tales from the Pizzaplex short story, Alone Together, a young boy is unaware of the fact he is a ghost, and only his grandma can see him. It's only when he finds his body in his school project, a large wooden puppet known as a Turk, where he has gotten stuck and suffocated, it is only then his memories come flooding back to him and he remembers everything that happened. We see a similar thing happen in the first FNAF movie, where Abby draws a picture of what really happened to the MCI and they remember. On page 23 of the logbook, Cassidy asks, "Is your favorite childhood toy a plastic purple telephone?" Of course, our minds first go to the crying child, but after the release of Secret of the Mimic, we see David also has that same plastic purple telephone. This question has a secondary follow-up question on page 42 to 43, where a variety of toys are presented. Cassidy/faded text asks, "Do any of these toys look familiar to you?" And of course, there's the phone from earlier. However, that shouldn't be the only one familiar to this spirit. Take a look at the dolls. Nothing too suspicious, right? Well, what if these were supposed to remind Dave of Dolly in the doll hospital? No, granted, they don't look exactly one-to-one like Dolly or any of the costumes seen in the hospital, but if you compare the boy and the girl dolls, the boy has stitches on his hands and feet, which kinda do remind me of the stitches in the suit from the hospital. And, Dolly, come on. On that same page, a Jack-in-the-Box can be seen. Once again, doesn't look one-to-one to Jackie, it's just supposed to jog his memory. They continue with asking on these pages, "Do any of these toys belong to you?" trying desperately to get this kid to remember who he was. Over and over and over, Cassidy is trying to get Dave to remember, and for the longest time, the FNAF community thought Cassidy was trying to help the bite victim remember who he was. But with the new evidence presented from Secret of the Mimic, it appears David Murray might be that spirit, as one of the questions seen on page 56 is, "Was your favorite ride the carousel?" To our knowledge, any Fredbear's or any location that the bite victim could have been to never had a carousel. So this could be referring to the carousel that's seen blocking the door to Moon's basement in MCM. But why? Why would both of these questions be explainable to both people? Unless, hear me out, they're just the same person. Now, I know that's crazy, but potentially, Afton kidnapped David and has him forget who he initially was. But after the bite of 83 and David actually dies in the hospital, his spirit would go on to become something much more vengeful, albeit not remembering much who he was. Time passes, more kids get killed, Cassidy has entered the chat. She can tell, unlike the other spirits who just needed to be led to their bodies and remember who they were, one of them has a harder time remembering who they were because their body isn't present. So Cassidy, with the assistance of David's adopted yet abusive older brother Michael, through the logbook helps Dave remember their name. Later on in the book, on page 70, there are questions like, do you miss them? With this reframed context, I think this is in reference to Edwin and Fiona, his real parents. On page 103, Cassidy reiterates, the party was for you, and Dave even responds by altering the text page on page 89, saying it was for me. Sure, this could be talking about Bite Victim and his birthday with the bite of 83, but it could also very strongly be talking about David's birthday and where he got kidnapped. This would also imply that David Murray is the cake receiver in Happiest Day. But that would mean David Murray is the one you should not have killed, right? That would explain why, out of all the animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night that the one you should not have killed speaks through, it's the mediocre melodies, as these are the ones he's most familiar with. And Chica's line of, I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed, lining up with the fact that Chica was originated at MCM. Now, before I go on, I can already hear some of you typing below. There's no way Scott had all this planned. And to that I say, you are correct. At least halfway. Scott explained in the second interview with Dawko,
whenever I'm making these games, there are a lot of things that are in my head that are just flowing ideas. And when I have them and put them there, it's the first half of something. It's like a string or a rope just like reaching out. And I know that what's there on the other end is there. I trust that it's there. I know that it's there. And then whenever I progress forward, the rest of it appears and just fits into place perfectly. That's how all my games have been made. I feel that there is something there, and I make the roads to get there for that to be revealed.
I think the one you should not have killed in Ultimate Custom Night, being this kind of unsolvable entity, was kind of exactly that point. No, he didn't have Edwin, the Mimic, or anything like that in mind. But I do believe that we weren't supposed to know anything true about David's name or backstory revolving around MCM or the Mimic, because Scott also didn't know it yet. He just knew that there was supposed to be a new character, a kid William had done wrong, and now that child will make sure he won't forget it. To be honest, this would make sense. When you look at the casting description, it says that the gender should not be clear. This could mean that he didn't thoroughly think out, oh, should it be a boy? Should it be a girl? I think he just knew about this kid, but later on, as the story developed and he kept writing the lines, it was clear that it became a boy, and that boy became David. And this whole entire next saga of FNAF has been explaining the origins of the one you should not have killed. Why many title the Scott era the Afton Saga, I would like to propose a name for this saga of games, the David Saga. Now, before I go, I do want to address some Oroville's in the room. Number 1, the age difference. David is 6 years old as of 1975, roughly when people think he was taken, meaning by the year of 1983, he would have had to have been anywhere from 12 to even 14. While we never get an official age for the crying child, that still seems too old to be talking to stuffed animals and need to be babysat by an older sibling. Not saying it's not possible, but it just seems unlikely. Number 2, what would Afton's motivations be? Why would he kidnap a business partner's kid and raise him as his own? There's not a lot of logic behind it, but the pieces still fit the same. There are clear connections between David Murray, the bite victim, and the one you should not have killed. Potentially, we aren't supposed to know those connections yet. Nevertheless, I'm excited to see what Steel Wool are planning, and hopefully it can shed more light on the fate of David Murray. If you like this video, drop a like down below, and hey, you're already down there, might as well subscribe and comment any thoughts you have on today's theory. Stay safe out there, and have a phaserific day.